Awesome. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Cindy and Becky. And thank you to both of you for making the time to do this tonight. So Cindy Heine, um, retired as the Associate Executive Director of the Pritchard Committee for Academic Excellence, which is a citizens group working to improve education in Kentucky. And prior to that, Cindy worked at the University of Kentucky Medical Center. Cindy's currently on the board of the League of Women Voters of Kentucky and also serves in that role as a liaison to the state legislature for the Kentucky League. Cindy received her bachelor's degree in nursing from the University of Michigan. Thanks, Cindy, for being here. And then Becky Jones, our second speaker, is semi-retired from a 30-year career as a trial consultant. Her educational background includes a bachelor's degree in government and communications from Morehead State University and an MBA from Xavier University in Cincinnati. Becky joined the league in 2018 as an at-large member, and with support and guidance from Cindy, she's helped organize the Northern Kentucky League in 2020 and served as the coordinator until June of 2023. And Becky is currently serving as the State League's first vice president since June of last year. And thank you, Becky, for everything and for being here as well.
Well, thanks for the invitation.
Yeah. So we had said that we had initially planned to do breakout groups, but I'm going to make an executive decision since we're a smaller group, that if you have questions that sort of are on your mind right now, feel free that you would like to ask Cindy and Becky about the upcoming or the ongoing legislative session. Feel free to do so. And Cindy and Becky, I'll also keep an eye on the chat to help you out. But I think, while you're doing that, Cindy and Becky, we can turn it over to you to get us started. So we have more time
Okay.
at the end for conversation as well.
Hey, go ahead, Becky.
Okay. Well, I'll first apologize that my computer speakers aren't working, so you see my name on there twice, and my audio is coming through the other background there. But I'm going to stop my video here so I can share some PowerPoint slides with you about our legislative report that was released in November of 2023. And you may be familiar with it, but you might want a little bit more background because it directly relates to how the legislature hears bills and they move through the process to become law. So this report involved an analysis of the Kentucky General Assembly's Legislative Research Commission's website of the legislative record dating from 1998 through the latest completed session. And let's see, let me get it to move here. There we go. So there are 4 questions that we're going to cover in a fairly quick order here. And the first question is, what are the opportunities for citizen participation in the Kentucky legislative process? Has the Kentucky General Assembly reduced opportunities for citizen participation? And has it always been this way in the legislature? And what can be done? So there was a sense among members that things are moving much more quickly than they used to. But we can't make accusations. We wouldn't make accusations just based on hunches. And so what we did was we had a transparency task force, as they came to be known, and they reviewed 271, well, more than that. They reviewed bills that covered the 60-day sessions between 1998 and 2022 for bills that passed and how they made their way through the process. So here is a visual on what opportunities exist for citizen participation in the legislative process. So each of these pillars here, you can see there is an opportunity for citizens to participate. When a bill is assigned to committee, you can contact committee members. when the committee discusses it. You can testify to the committee. Then it moves out of committee if it's positively reported and moves to the chamber for a first, second, and third floor reading. And the readings they don't have to read the bill in total. They call the name of it and title. And but during that process, 3 different days, members of the public can contact all members of the House or Senate, including members that aren't on that particular committee that the bill comes from, and voice their opinion. And then let's see here. This is the next slide. It just jumped a little bit on me, but has the General Assembly reduced opportunities for citizen participation? So the short answer is yes, they have. And if you, let me just toggle back and forth here. You see these pillars, these purple pillars. Down below, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 opportunities for citizens to participate if the process is followed. But as it has been happening, the bills are taken out of committee before they're heard in the committee and given a first and second reading on the chamber floor. Then it's assigned to a committee. So that's the first time that citizens can contact committee members about the original bill. And then there's this issue of substitute versions of bills being adopted and voted out of committee, which should not happen on the same day, but it does. And then, of course, the bills have to flip-flop and go to the other chamber for consideration as well. So there are what the committee identified 4 fast-track tactics that shrink citizen participation in the process. As we said, the bill readings before any standing committee action has been taken. There are committee substitutes adopted with little discussion or public comment. Floor votes are held within a day after the final committee action. And the free conference committee reports are adopted within a day after being released. And we can talk more about how free conference committees work. That's when bills are heard in each chamber, and there's difference in how the bills are adopted or amended, and then the free conference committee comes together to work out those differences. So has it always been this way? That's our third question. And as you can see, the answer is no. Back in 1998, when the task force started studying bills, and the reason they chose 1998 was because that's as far back as the Legislative Research Commission documents are available online. So they spanned, 25-year period during these 60-day legislative sessions. So in 1998, you can see that it was a total of 5% of bills that became law, either through the House or Senate, used these fast track maneuvers. The high point was 2014, when 42% of House bills became law using fast track maneuvers. That declined a little bit, but went back up. So in 2022, the number stood at 32% of House bills and 24% of Senate bills used some form of fast track maneuver before they became law. And you can just clearly see and understand how that cuts out citizen participation. But even more so, it cuts out legislative participation. Bills can be fast-tracked in such a way that even legislators don't have time to read, question, understand what they're voting on before they take a vote. So what can the legislature do to increase citizen participation? And this is important to go over. We want them to schedule the 3 bill readings after committees have heard the bills. We want them to make committee substitute bills available online at least 1 day before committee meetings. Allow at least 1 day between final committee action on bills and the House or Senate floor votes on those bills. And lastly, allow at least 1 day between free conference committee revisions and the House or Senate floor vote. So how can we help? Number one, participate. Monitor the legislative session for opportunities to participate. And we can talk about that and even go to the LRC website if we want to highlight some features on how to get involved in watching committee hearings. Number two, contact legislators. Each time legislation is rushed, our task force members are, in addition to watching committee meetings and following specific bills, trying to keep track of this very metric. Three, grassroots advocacy. Raise awareness and promote change through social media petitions, letters to the editor, and call or visit your legislator. You'll have an opportunity to do that in February when we have League Day on February 7th. You can engage in peaceful demonstrations and protests. And five, vote for representatives that value citizen input and participation. If you have a legislator who doesn't seem responsive to allowing citizen participation in the legislative process, then it's perfectly fine to want to support another representative or someone who would. As Jen mentioned before we started, the League is a nonpartisan organization. Doesn't mean we're not political. We are a political organization, but we don't, and that allows us to take action on issues, but at the same time, we don't support or oppose candidates or political parties. We support diversity, equity, and inclusion in our membership and our programming. And there is our League in Action app, which Jen is very fond of highlighting, and we're growing more fond of it every day because it allows us to stay in contact with one another in a much more efficient fashion and share what we have learned with friends and family in our communities wherever we live. So I'm going to stop sharing here. I'll turn my video back on so I can see you. All right, that was a real quick breeze through that 8-page report that members of the task force spent I don't know how many hours working on reviewing 1,500 some bills, wasn't it, Cindy? Yeah. Are there questions about that particular aspect of the legislative process from Maryland?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I know that the legislature heard a lot our comments and about their rules, but they didn't seem to do what we wanted. And now I was wondering if they've adopted their rules for the session. Is there any possibility of them changing their rules for the session, or is that it once they adopt the rules for the session? Is there any point in continuing to, I mean, obviously we can continue to complain, but is there any chance it would change rules at this point?
I don't think so. And I'm just going to, Cindy, you can follow up. They won't change the rules. What they can vote to do is suspend the rules. And they can do that pretty much whenever they want to. But what has become even more galling was when fast track maneuvers were being used and they didn't even bother to take a vote to suspend the rules. They would just move forward. But no, I don't think, Maryland, that they would change any of their rules. And their rules would allow for what we're asking for if they just follow that process. Cindy, you want to?
Yeah, I'll also say it's obvious that they have been paying attention because they're saying things in committee meetings and on the floor even about now this bill is eligible now for its first reading and it'll have its second reading tomorrow and its third reading then on Monday, and then we can vote on it on that third reading. So they're paying attention, and except for one bill at the very beginning that had some emergency issues related to it, they are pretty much following the rules. They may be trying a few more sneaky things, but we'll be paying attention. But they have so far been doing the readings properly. So.
There's a little question on House Bill 5 that there was a called Judiciary Committee this afternoon, but I think they did squeeze in under the rule of providing 24 hours in between calling for a committee meeting and providing
Providing the committee substitute, right. And
yeah.
the committee substitute went to the members of the committee, but they weren't made public, and they won't be made public until tonight when they wrap up all the work of today and get it up on the LRC website.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Jennifer Jackson.
So I just wanted to, because this is in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, but really we're not even necessarily asking them to change the rules, but just to really abide by the rules that they had set. So, because really the rules being the same as they were last year, is really fine, but it's the not the doing the stuff that sort of kind of bends the rules of the process, or like doesn't follow the spirit of the rules, I guess. Is that?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's
I think
right.
that. Yeah. And Deb Grainer put a question in the chat that she asked, did Speaker Osborne say the study didn't go back far enough? He may have said that. 25 years of
He did say it. I heard him. Sorry to butt in.
No, that's fine.
I very rarely report stuff like that when I shared the report on Facebook to different places. And I actually put that in my comment because I knew how hard you all work. So sorry. See ya.
Yeah, I don't take that as a significant comment that it didn't go back far enough.
We went back 25 years.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't undertake to, go from the start of time. So.
Yeah, Zitzi's got a question. Zitzi?
Yeah, I was curious if we know sort of what factors are correlated with this fast track maneuvering, right? It's really striking to me that there's like the trend that you showed. So, we see sort of an upward trend, we see it peak, and then we see it decline before starting to come back up again. Even if they're hypotheses, I'm curious as to like, what do we know anything about what's driving those changes?
I don't think we really do. We have some hunches. When you look at the bills that are fast-tracked, often they're more controversial bills. For example, the sewer bill that turned into a bill that had a great impact on our teacher and state government retirement. And the bill, Senate Bill 150 last year, that had an impact on trans children and services that they could or couldn't have by so it tends to be more controversial bills. The budget always goes into the session at the end with the free conference committee because it's so complicated, and they just go into a closed room, and in fact it's a closed meeting. You don't know what's happened until they come out of there. And that's also happens at the end of the session when time is getting tight and they want to try to rush things, and that's a way to rush them. But they rush things that they haven't had to when they've had plenty of time. And I think in my observation, they tend to be a little more controversial bills.
Yeah, and we'd been asked about, is there any correlation between which party's in power and majorities or super majorities? And you can see that the trend line covers when Democrats were in control, Republicans are in control. And the point of the study really wasn't to try to draw any correlation between who's in power, but just what is happening. And we did hear, I think it's in the report from, was it Senator Webb, who said, it's always been that way. And I think the really negative thing is when legislators think, well, it's no big deal because they did it, so we'll do it, whoever they and we are. And so it just is a process that keeps happening and happening, and everybody becomes sort of blind to it and what it's doing to the public.
Yeah, I mean, and to Jen's point, the other thing that was striking to me is that they're clearly like the legislature is being inconsistent, right? So whatever the percentages are of the bills being fast tracked, the remaining percentage, I assume, are going through the normal process.
Yep.
And so there's this like internal inconsistency as well, which I think is like what Jen's point was underscoring earlier.
Right. Can we move on to, because I'd like to get into one more,
Yeah.
Marilyn?
Well,
Yeah, I just wanted to ask one more question. I thought that there was something that they were stopping putting on the LRC website, some of the bills.
yes.
Did they continue to decide to leave that information off? What was it they're not doing anymore?
Pre-filed bills. There's no such thing as a pre-filed bill anymore. So day one of the session, they adopt their rules, and then the legislators can have their bills filed with the LRC, and then that's when they go up on the website, as opposed to they could get a bill request, a BR, before the sessions in the past, and they would be carried on the LRC website. So folks could have advance notice of what legislators are looking at doing. Now, the answer to that was that you could contact the individual legislator and ask what they were working on, and ask them to share their bill drafts with you, which is possible if you want to contact 138 legislators. It's not very efficient to do it that way. And of course, the press doesn't have any advance notice of what's happening or what might be happening. So, Jan Jackson.
Because Zitzi had pointed out like the percentages kind of like dipped down and went back up. Can you
Right.
comment on the absolute number of bills versus like people may be reassured by those percentages, but can you comment on what's happening with the absolute number of bills that are experiencing that?
We need Susan Weston for that question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You need one of the analysts.
But generally, my understanding is that the absolute number of bills is still increasing that are being affected by this. So, like, if you have,
Yes,
if there were only 100 bills and 30 of them were fast tracked in a year, but if there's 1,500 bills or 1,200 bills, and it's only 30, it's still 30%. Like, that is a lot of legislation that's
Right.
passing. And my understanding is that in 2022, the absolute number of bills that were being fast tracked was still skyrocketing too. So
when I go off screen, Jen, and Cindy's talking, I'll turn around and look for that in my book.
yeah, I couldn't remember the exact number, but
do you want me to show Bill Track 50 real quick, Cindy?
yeah, why don't you do that real quickly, and then we'll jump into key legislation this session.
Yeah, some hot bills that you're going to hear about through League in Action. So we don't have this up on our website yet, but we will have it's called a stakeholder page, or our bill tracker. This is from last year, so you might be familiar with it. When you went to the State League homepage website, you'll find all of these bills listed that we're following, and you will find what the short name is. You will find what our position is. So, for instance, the income tax bill from 2023, HB1, the league position was strong oppose. And if you touch, and you will have this access, if you touch the bill number, it will take you to all of this information that tells you what the bill is about, who the sponsors are, what the last action was. And as you can see, this is constantly updated. So it was signed by the governor on February 17th of last year. If you want to read more about it, go to official document and touch that. And then that takes you into the Legislative Research Commission website, where you get even more data on how what's the vote history, if you want to follow that, how it flowed through the committees into the chambers. And if you want to read the actual document, go to a final. You can read them all, but if you touch the final, then this is what was adopted as law. So that's just a real quick review of what you're going to be able to see Bill Tracker cover for the league. Okay. And Cindy, we're going to go over some bills now.
And let me just say that bill tracker list is created by our legislative team. We're now calling it our Legislative Kentucky Action Team, or Advocacy Team. We've got 10 small subgroups that are looking at different issue areas, and they're reviewing bills for us, watching committee meetings, and kind of following bills. And they're giving us recommendations on whether we should support or oppose. We support or oppose bills based on league policy. We don't just pick decisions out of thin air, but National and State League do studies over the years and have policies on many of these issues. And so we look to guidance from those policy documents to help us decide whether to support or oppose bills. And sometimes, as much as we might want to jump in on a bill, we really don't have a policy.
Cindy, oh, you're back.
Sorry, I hit my space button. We do go take bills to our state board and get their okay on support, oppose for that list. And so the reason it's not up yet is because the board meets Saturday. We'll be taking bills to them and get our first list. That list will continue to change as we go through the session. And so there will be a link on the homepage of the Kentucky website, LWVKY.org, and you can go follow it. We hope to have it up by the middle of next week. So that's Becky handles that piece of our work, and it's fabulous, and we really appreciate it.
So I can, as you're talking, Cindy, this is not meant to interrupt, but this is just to show everybody that right now this is the working list of all bills filed, and there's not a lot of information in here yet, but you can see down here, so far there are 511 bills filed.
They've been busy. They've been busy.
Cindy?
Yeah, Mary?
I want to make sure I understood something you said. Okay, these committees, these groups of people that are looking at the bills for the league, you said if we don't have a position, if the league does not have a position, then we don't oppose or
support.
Okay.
Right. So there are some things the league has never really taken issues on.
Right.
Like issues around pets or animals. So
Okay.
those are things we just wouldn't address.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how we
Many
make
other things.
Yeah,
Too many other important things.
That's right. That's right. Okay, so what I'm going to do is kind of walk through some of the major things that we heard were coming in for this session from legislative leaders, and then I'll add to it some of the thoughts that we have or the things that we're looking for that we may or may not support. So let me just start with, there's a strong majority in both houses of one party. In the Senate, there are 38 Republicans and 8 Democrats, and in the House, 78 Republicans and 20 Democrats. So they have what we call supermajorities, and they can do pretty much anything they want. Although sometimes they get to a point where they don't have the votes and they have to do some bargaining, which they've been doing for years, obviously. In the House, there are 2 open seats, 2 Members retired and have taken jobs with the government, actually, and some of the constitutional offices. The governor is obviously in the minority party, meaning he doesn't have a lot of control except for use of his bully pulpit. He does veto bills, but they are all overridden. They have enough votes to easily override. And for some reason, our override only requires a majority vote. So they only need 51 votes in the House and 17, I think, or 18 in the Senate. So it's very easy for the chambers to override the governor's vetoes. On session 1 this year, they actually jumped in and had lengthy discussions about their rules. They've never had discussions about their rules. They pass them as resolutions. The leadership tells them what's changed. They vote on it and they're done. Well, this year they had lengthy discussions. There was a small faction of Republicans who have been kind of ignored, and they were feeling the need to express their views. And so they came out with their own rules, and they actually filed a resolution. They didn't pass, but they did say, hey, wait a minute, we need to represent our constituents better. We need to have a better voice. And I think because of our report and because of that small faction of folks, they did spend a lot of time on it. And as I said earlier, they are starting to show that they're paying attention and that they are following the readings the way they're supposed to. But we're obviously watching with a keen eye to be sure that they do that. Legislative priorities. This is a 60-day session, and every 2 years in their 60-day sessions, they have to deal with a budget. So that's the biggest thing they will deal with this session. There's been some interesting games going on with the budget. The tradition is that the governor presents his budget address, usually late in January. And then his bill that is filed by someone from his party is filed, and those bills have to be filed in the House. The House deals with them and then sends their version to the Senate. Senate deals with them, and then they end up coming to a compromises in free conference committee at the end of the session. Well, last year, the House decided to file their own budget bill before the governor's budget address. Well, that was kind of a unusual affair. But so they did that, and then the governor did his address, and then the governor's bill was filed, and of course they ignored the governor's bill. This year, the governor jumped ahead of them, and he did his budget address before they convened in January. So he got ahead of them, and then very early in the session, his bill was filed. His bill was actually filed last week. This week, the House filed their bills. And for some reason, and I don't understand this, we used to have one budget for executive branch, one for judicial, one for legislative, and then transportation. This year, they have 2 budget bills for each branch of the government. Now, they just got filed yesterday, day before, and I haven't yet figured out or found anybody who understands exactly why they've done that. But anyway, there are now 6 budget bills filed. And for those people who are paying attention to the budget, that's a lot of work to be reading all those bills. Now, in the budget, one of the key issues that the league has as a priority is funding for early care and education. We would support all day, or I mean, full kindergarten for all children. That was in the governor's budget. It is not in the state budget. The House budget does have increases, but not nearly enough to meet the need. And so there's going to have to be some conversation if we're going to get more money for those early childhood programs. One of the other huge issues that the legislature has been dealing with is the income tax reduction, the cuts in the income tax. Our income tax had been 5%, and it is now 4%, and they want to continue to cut it. Their plan is every year, if the parameters are correct, and those are financial parameters, they will continue to cut another 0.5% until our income tax is gone. One of the things that, one of the parameters is that they have to have what they call the Budget Reserve Trust Fund, which is basically a rainy day fund. And that has to be a certain percent of the budget. Right now, it's $3.7 billion. And with the current new budget that they just passed yesterday, or just filed yesterday, by the first year of this biennium, it will be 5.5 billion. And by the second year, it'll be 6 billion. Now, that's a lot of money to have sitting around as an incentive to keep cutting income tax. Income tax is our most reliable source of revenue for the state. And there are a lot of people, including the league, who don't really think that's a good idea. But they're pushing forward on that issue. So we will just see how that goes. They've actually in this budget suspended some of the parameters for being able to cut the taxes. I don't quite understand it all, except that I think if they set the initial rules, they should have stuck by them if they're going to cut billions of dollars out of our revenue proceeds. So we will probably be opposing that. Now, another huge issue that they have been talking about for a year now is wanting to change the Constitution to allow private schools to use public revenues. The current legislature has been working, or the last couple of years have been working to provide funding for charter schools, and there was a bill that would have provided tax credits, not tax deductions, but tax credits for contributions to private schooling, scholarships, or private schools. That was taken to court and found to be unconstitutional because our Constitution does not provide for public tax revenues to be used for private schools. So what's the solution to that? If you want to use public money for private schools, change the Constitution. So they're working, and there is a bill, and I've forgotten the number, but there is a bill that would put on the ballot an amendment that would change the Constitution so that public monies could be used for private institutions. Now, that bill does talk about using them only for low-income students. I think that makes it a little complicated. It'll be interesting to see whether that's the only bill that's out there. I was kind of surprised at that bill and that sponsor. There may end up being another bill similar. The big questions are, will there be enough legislators to support that bill? Our rural communities and rural schools and rural legislators know they cannot afford to lose students and money because their schools often are struggling, and losing any money or any students at all is a real challenge. So it's always been hard for that issue to find support in rural communities. They bargained and got the tax credit bill through by twisting a lot of arms. And so they may be able to get that through this time. But then the next question is, will the citizens of Kentucky support it? And in the past, that's not been something citizens have been supportive of. So it's a big question, a big, huge issue, and we'll be watching that closely. We will oppose that bill. We do not support private schools getting public money because we think we need to be supporting more fully and carefully. Thanks, Becky. We need to be providing sufficient funding for our public institutions, our public schools, and we don't think we should be diverting tax dollars to private schools unless those were fully funded. Okay, another big issue is Senate Bill 5. Somebody mentioned that already. It's going to be known as Jake's Law, and they've been talking about it as Safer Kentucky Act. And that bill was filed just this week. It was assigned to the committee this afternoon, and it went to a hearing this afternoon after they adjourned, and they were in committee meeting for about 2.5 to 3 hours today. It is an omnibus bill attempting to try to make Kentucky a safer place for people to live and work. It has multiple sections with lots of different efforts. I can't say that I could ever begin to explain it, but it does deal with fentanyl and the concern there. It does increase jail time for a number of offenses. It has a 3 times you have a violent felony and you're in life for prison. It does provide some additional resources to support folks in prison who are coming out to help them reintegrate into the community. It does have stronger offenses for killing first responders. And one of the things that a lot of people have really taken note of, including the Herald Leader in a huge story this morning, is it criminalizes people who camp on the streets. In other words, it criminalizes homelessness. And those folks will probably end up in prison. Usually when there is a bill that's going to have a fiscal impact, there has to have a study done and a fiscal impact statement. And the one that's on the bill right now just basically talks about the billions of dollars it's going to cost to house these increased number of people. So the bill did pass out of committee this afternoon. It will go to the floor tomorrow for its first reading. And then next week it can get its second and third reading. And by middle of the week, they could vote on it. But we anticipate seeing a lot of conversation around that bill. We are reviewing it at this time. The league has not taken a position. I know there are pieces of it that we would not support. There are pieces that we probably would support. But that's to be decided. Let's see. Let me go with those. Those were some of the key issues that we heard about prior to the session. Let me go to some of the league's issues and priorities, and then I'll mention some other bills that we're seeing or we have seen. Keep in mind, they've already filed over 500 bills. It's been less than a month. They have until I forgot to check the date, but late February, they can no longer file bills. And that's supposed to save time and effort and be sure they have plenty of time to deal with them. One of the things that Becky and I have noticed is they're filing on the deadline date mule bills. In other words, an empty bill that has a topic of education and it'll say technical corrections. So there's really nothing in it, but that bill that could then be amended and they could add anything they wanted. And so they've been doing that a lot and pushing a lot of bills toward the end of the session, which makes it more difficult to get, it's another reason for them to want to use these fast track methods because that's the only way they get some of these bills through. So one of our priorities is restoration of voting rights for persons with past convictions. It's been a longstanding issue for us. And I think are finally at a point where leadership in the Senate, that's usually been the bottleneck, has agreed to a bill that we believe will be filed this session. Senator Brandon Storm from London filed a bill last time that we could support and the advocates for this issue could support. He has said that he will file it again, but we also have heard that there's going to be a companion bill in the House, and he is waiting for that bill to be filed before he files his. I think to be sure they read the same. So we're encouraged that we may get a good bill out there, and then of course the issue will be getting it passed. It would put a constitutional amendment on the ballot to let citizens decide whether or not to change the Constitution to automatically restore voting rights to persons who have completed their sentencing. anyway, that's a priority for the league, but keep in mind, we've been working on this since 2005. Second big issue that we're interested in is the reduction of gun violence. We've not really jumped in on this issue much before, but at the annual meeting this year, the board and the members decided that was an issue. I think a lot of that stemmed from the shooting and more shootings in Jefferson County that really impacted not only the governor because one of his friends was killed, but people in the community knew those folks. And I think we just are all fed up with all of these school shootings that we seem to have no control over. So we have decided we would address those issues. We've seen some bills that we could support and some that we could oppose. We haven't signed off on those yet, but we will be doing that. For example, there are 2 bills that would allow 18-year-olds to conceal carry. Right now, the age limit is 21. Where I don't think we're going to support that. And there are a number of bills that would require safe storage. There's another one that would demand that if a person's gun was stolen or lost, that they report it. Because it's my understanding that a lot of guns involved in crimes, especially with young people, have been stolen from cars or maybe their parents' closet, who knows? We do understand that Senator Whitney Westerfield is going to file a crisis aversion and rights restoration bill, a CAR bill. Those have been filed around the country and passed in 19 other states. That would allow temporary removal of guns from someone who is in a mental crisis and who is a clear threat to him or herself or other people. This is a bill that a young woman named Whitney, who was shot at a bank in Cincinnati several years ago. She's a Kentuckian who worked in Lowell, but she'd gone to Cincinnati for a meeting, happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And she has created an organization called Whitney Strong that's been working on a bipartisan basis to get a bill passed that would at least remove guns from people who clearly are in mental crisis. We aren't sure if that bill will get support or not. It hasn't been filed yet, but we're anticipating that, and we will very likely be a strong supporter of that bill. Now, other issues that we're interested in, I mentioned that education is an issue we care about, and the 2 issues there that we'll be supporting, or one supporting, is early childhood education. The other that we will be opposing is the public dollars for private schools, that constitutional amendment. So those are 2 education bills, but there are lots of other bills that have been filed. Some that are kind of interesting. One would abolish the Council on Post-Secondary Education and replace it with the Kentucky Higher Education Assistance Authority. I don't know where that idea came from, but you never know what's going to show up. Now, 2 bills that we're very interested in, and our education committee is working on position statements on, are Senate Bill 6 and Senate Bill 93. These are bills that are attacking the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in our schools and post-secondary institutions. Senate Bill 6 would allow lawsuits for aggrieved people up to $100,000. This is a strategy that we're seeing in legislation. Penalties for things like this that are not even crimes, that are real threats and cause people to pause before they even think about doing whatever this bill says they can't do. And the other problem is the language is very unclear. It's not clear what you can and can't do, I think, in many of these bills. So it puts a damper on what teachers or faculty think they can do. These are sponsored by some folks. One is a member of leadership, Senator Mike Wilson, is sponsoring Senate Bill 6. So I'm sure they've both been sent to committee, and so the education committee, so they will be heard in committee. And we'll see. Anyway, the league is working on some very good, strong statements about those, and you'll be seeing those once the board has approved and we've issued them publicly. So lots of interesting education things going on. One of the other things we're working on in one of our stronger committees is our elections and voting issues. There are lots of issues there, and a lot of bills have been filed already. Senate Bill 10 is the one that is moving. It's already passed through the Senate. It is a constitutional amendment that would move the election of our constitutional officers. That's the governor, the treasurer, the secretary of state, all of those folks, to even numbered years in a year when all legislators in the House are reelected and many other local elections take place. If that happens, it would not occur until the next gubernatorial administration. So it would be quite a few years out, but that would be a bill that would need a change in the Constitution. So it requires 2/3 vote in the House and Senate, and then it will require going on the ballot and the public approval or not. So be watching that. We don't have a position on that. We don't really have a position, state or local, on when you elect certain people. So we'll just be monitoring that one. There is a bill, House Bill 151, unfortunately sponsored by a Democrat, so it won't see the light of day. But it would extend voting hours from 6 in the morning to 7 p.m. instead of 6 p.m. So it would give us an extra hour of voting. There's another bill, Senate Bill 61, that would remove the extra no excuse voting days, those 3 no excuse voting days from our voting opportunities. This is an old-fashioned guy who thinks we all ought to vote on the same day because it's a great day and, you know, it's a patriotic thing. And he thinks the extra voting is just too expensive. So I don't know where that bill will go, but my guess is we're going to oppose that because it limits opportunities for people, for our citizens to vote. There are 2 bills. I don't think they'll go anywhere either. Senate Bill 83 and House Bill 152 that would remove straight party voting. In other words, you couldn't go in and just click Republican or click Democrat. You had to go down and vote for each candidate. Those are not likely to see the light of day either, but they have been filed. Another bill would change voter ID rules and take away student IDs as appropriate voter identification. And then there is one bill that will not see the light of day either, House Bill 153, to elect the president by popular vote. So bills like that get filed all the time. They don't go anywhere, but it's interesting that somebody is interested in them. There are many health bills, and I'm not even going to talk about those because I don't feel like I understand them, and we haven't really discussed them or identified which ones we're going to support or not in with the board. But there are many, and they're pretty complex usually. There is a bill that would abolish the death penalty and replace it with life imprisonment. That is an issue that the League has always supported, abolishing the death penalty. It has never gotten even a hearing, so my guess is this won't either. The Crown Act has been filed again. It failed in the Senate with a strong leader supporting it, and I'm afraid it'll fail again because this is not a Senate strong leader sponsor. Senator Westerfield has also filed an interesting bill, Senate Bill 24. It's called the Family Wellbeing Act. He is a strong opponent of abortion, and he, in his effort to provide support for young families that are perhaps not planned families, he has put together a very extensive bill that would provide prenatal maternity support and supports after the child is born. And that bill actually has some requests in it for childcare funds. That bill is also under study. I'm not sure where we're going to go with that. Talking about reproductive rights, there are two bills, really interesting issue that we're going to have to dig into a bit. They would allow women to apply for child support once they were pregnant after conception. One in the House, one in the Senate. The sponsors say they are just trying to provide these young women with financial support because planning for getting ready for a baby is expensive. But there are folks who are very concerned that this lays the groundwork for personhood for fetuses. And that could get into some very tricky legal issues, I'm sure. So it's going to be interesting to hear the conversations around those. And then just some of the interesting other tidbits that we won't take positions on. One is there have been a bunch of bills that have been filed that would reduce taxes for retirees, mostly through the reduction of the retirement income, taxes on retirement income, and or reductions in the requirement for seniors to pay property taxes. Actually, it would be an increase in the exemption in that Homestead Act that allows seniors to pay less for their housing. This is an election year, and so you can always say, I filed a bill to reduce your taxes. I don't know that those are going to go anywhere, but there are a number of them, which I think is interesting. This one, I don't know if we'll take a position on or not, but there are at least 4 bills out there that would provide tax relief, no sales tax on menstrual products. So sanitary pads and Tampax and those things. And one of the bills would actually provide those supplies for children, for young girls in middle and high schools. You know, when you think about it, we did a drive for those kinds of products for a women's center in Lexington this year. And I went out and I was surprised at how expensive they are. It's been a long time since I've had to buy those products. So I can understand the need, and the sales tax relief would help. But I'm sure that some schools probably do provide supplies for those that really can't afford them. And I bet there are a lot of teachers that have supplies, you know, in their desks that they share with students that need them. And then there have been a bunch of hunting bills. You know, you start reading through these bills and you think, where's this coming from? There are a bunch of hunting bills. Apparently, there is an effort in all of these bills to let property owners hunt on their own property and not have to buy tags for them, you know, pay to hunt. I'm sure they'll pass with the number of bills that are out there. Somebody thinks it's really important. And then there's a really bizarre one that would remove penalties for hunting Cooper's hawks or red-tailed hawks. Some farmers, I guess, are having trouble with these hawks, and so they want to get rid of them. And they say there are plenty of them. So there's no reason to protect them any longer. So anyway, following legislative bills is really quite fascinating. It can be depressing some days, it can be exciting some days, but it also can, you know, be a puzzlement some days. Questions or comments or thoughts about any of those? I've lost track of time here. We're probably, we're after 8 already.
Cindy, there was just one other issue I wanted to point out.
Becky, yeah, please do.
Yeah, to keep our eyes on. And when you were talking about voting issues and election bills, the state league we have a task force on studying open primaries, and that'll be coming to the local leagues to talk about. And in a conversation I had this week with the president of the Tennessee League, asking how they work the open primaries in Tennessee, she asked if we had seen any legislation filed that would make our local races partisan. And it has shown up in the past. Yes. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's not going to show up again. And I said, no, we haven't seen that yet. And her word of caution was, it's coming for you.
Yeah.
So that's another one I think we just want to keep our eyes peeled for.
Yep. Great. Thanks, Bill. That's a great reminder, Becky. Becky put in the notes that the last day to file bills in the House is February 26th, and the last days to file bills in the Senate is February 28th. The session ends on the 15th of April, but they have a 2-week break for their veto days. So they basically wrap up pretty much at the end of March. And then they come back for 2 days in the middle of April and finish up everything else. Deb Grainer, you've got a question.
Yeah, just a quick question from what was just mentioned. Quinn and I have been talking about this. What happens in local elections that are nonpartisan if more than 2 people apply for or running for the same?
Generally,
seat?
what happens, Deb, now there may be some counties that are different, but generally they have a primary runoff. And the 2 top vote getters in the primary run against each other in the general election.
Thank you, Cindy, but appreciate it.
Yep, sure.
And when it comes to city councils, commissions, school boards and things like that, they sometimes the city has its own rules. Like they will have a primary, will trigger a primary if you have more than 9 candidates filing for the city council or the commission. Otherwise, there's no primary. Yeah.
Yep, good question. Other questions or other comments or thoughts? While you're
Thank-
thinking, I want to put in another plug for League Day. Every year we have a day when League members go to Frankfurt for a day. We gather and have a lot of fun, meet members from across the state. We meet with our legislators, we go to committee meetings, and we advocate for our issues. So League Day is Wednesday, February 7th. We'll have a kickoff to League Day, a Zoom meeting on the evening of February 1st to give people an update on which bills we want them to be talking about. Be sure they have clear directions for getting around the Capitol. So watch for that. We'll have an email that goes out to all members probably middle of next week with a registration form and as many details as we have sent. So we hope you'll consider coming and joining us in Frankfurt. And Deb lives in Frankfurt, so Deb, you better be there.
Yes, ma'am.
You don't have to stay all day, Deb. You can just come for a little while. Okay, any other questions? Jen, do you want to talk about the League in Action and action alerts?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Oh, wait a minute. Quinn had a question. Quinn?
Yeah, I was just wondering, since I know you've been working on it, Cindy, about any updates from Rep. Decker about
yes.
a potential bill to make it easier to vote from jail.
Yes. Quinn was one of the members of the team who went into the detention center here in Fayette County and registered folks there to vote. And one of the challenges, we came across a couple of challenges, but one was it's difficult for them to apply for absentee ballots because in Fayette County, they don't let them have any access to the internet, and access to the phones is a problem. They have to pay to make phone calls. So the one thing I think she's going to do is maybe that, Quinn, that was the most interesting thing. And we got feedback from Trey Grayson, who works with the Republicans, that he thinks she's going to try to do a number of those things. I haven't spoken to her directly, but I was encouraged by that. So my plan is to, next time I'm in Frankfurt, try to sit down with her and see where she is, and we can provide any more information.
Awesome. That's good news. Thanks, Cindy.
Quinn was a great help getting us organized in to go to the detention center. We met every Tuesday for about 5 or 6 weeks and spent the morning, and Quinn was our leader. Okay, Jen?
Yeah, so League in Action is the League's app. So if you haven't had a chance to download it, you can just go wherever you get your apps. So they're on Apple or an Android phone. Sorry, my cat really just wants to be up here. And it's a free app. It's branded for League of Women Voters. If you have Outreach Circle, it's the same thing. You're going to see the same content there if for people who've had it in the past. But the League in Action one is kind of cool because it's got our little logo and whatever, but it's all the same. But we use it for a lot of different things throughout the year. So when you sign up, make sure that you allow app notifications. We're not sending you stuff all the time. It's not like Macy's or, you know, Bionic Shoes. It's like sending me stuff all the time. So we're very selective about when we send things out, but it is a way for us to send out like election reminders so you don't miss important deadlines, because there's a very narrow window now to like, suppose you're can't make it to the polls and you need to request an absentee ballot. That is a very narrow, like 31-day window. So we send reminders about those kind of things. But during this time of the year, we also send out information about action alerts. So legislation that the League is following, we will provide information about how to like what the talking points are. They will have one click, like leave a message on the call the messaging line, or, you know, other things that just make it easy. Like it takes out that whole process of like having to get it in your email and then you've got to like find the phone number and dial it in. Like it just makes it all just like smooth in one click, and you can just sort of scroll. It's I think of it as like a just like a bulletin board basically of stuff. So it's not, I know some people in the past gotten confused thinking it's like social media, they have to post stuff. That's not like what it's like at all. It's basically just like a place, or if you want to find out what's going on with the League, you can kind of scroll through, see the different things. We'll have you know, you can just learn about different topics. We'll have videos or links to like during League Day, we use it a lot to also help with logistics. So like if we find out that one of the entrances is closed or a parking lot is closed or something, we can send out a quick little message to like make sure you're on the right track. So anyway, a lot of good stuff there. We'll be also touching on this at the kickoff on February 1st. But of course, we'll be reviewing all of the legislation and stuff, so people can kind of feel a little more comfortable when they go on lobby day, and make sure people have appointments set up with legislators if they're planning on doing that, and all of that other stuff. So you can follow the when you set up your account, there's a little magnifying glass at the bottom. You can just search for Kentucky or KY, and then follow the League of Women Voters of Kentucky. And also you can search again, put in KY, and then follow the League of Women Voters of Lexington. Or if you happen to be here tonight and you live in another part of the state, you can check out their outreach circle too. So they'll have a little bit different content, you know, kind of depending on where you are. The state outreach circle tends to have more of the legislative actions and the election reminders and stuff. And of course, when your local outreach circle, you'll see a lot more information about like local events, voter registration opportunities, other things. And you don't have to be a League member. You don't have to, excuse me, I'm just like getting a little dry in my throat. Anybody can be on League in Action. You don't have to be a woman. You don't have to be a member of the League. You don't, any of that. If you just have somebody who's like, I can't remember, who's super busy and can't remember when they need to go vote, like somebody who's in college, who's got a lot of other stuff going on, or really anybody. We're all so busy these days. I'm like super reliant on my phone telling me stuff, like when it's my friend's birthdays. So anyway, if you know people like that, it's a great tool for them. And certainly if you know people that want to volunteer with the League, we have tons of opportunities, and we have, you know, people that can help with this kind of thing. Also, again, like great resume builders and give you like good experience and stuff for any younger people that want to like volunteer. So anyway, that's my gig.
Let me just add, I put the phone number for the message line easy, quick way to leave a message for legislators in the chat. You might want to put that in your phone so it's handy and easy to get to. The ladies and gentlemen who answer those phones are very friendly and very pleasant. If you haven't called them before, they will ask for your name and your address. Once you're in the system and you give your name, they'll often say, oh, do you live at such and such a place? And they do that because legislators want to know who is calling them, if they're their constituents or not. Those messages go up to the legislators very quickly. You can leave a message for 1 or 2 legislators. You can leave a message for a whole committee. You can leave a message for every member of the legislature. But the ones that are more impactful, are the ones that come from constituents. So don't hesitate to call. They're friendly and very helpful. And we'll be sending alerts not only through LIA, but we'll do our old-fashioned way of emails also, telling you a bit about the bill, why we support it or oppose it, and then ask you to call. We time those based on committee hearings or floor votes. So usually we will have a time frame. Please call by tomorrow at 10 o'clock because there's a committee meeting tomorrow and they'll be voting on it. Or please call before next Tuesday because they'll be voting on the floor. Mary?
Very quickly, Cindy, when are we, I'm planning to come to League Day and I want to talk to maybe my senator and my representative. Okay. What kind of time frame should we look at? I know we all gather together in the morning. I know we're going to go over this, but I felt like I needed to make an appointment.
The best bet is to call their office and talk to their assistant and find out when they're available.
Okay.
And that sometimes dictates. Our schedule doesn't necessarily. They have many meetings during the day. They may have other appointments. And our meetings will be flexible. So you can feel free to pop out of our meeting if you've got a meeting with a legislator.
Okay.
And I'd go ahead and call next week. Don't hesitate to call early because they do get booked. If you're a constituent and you've got an appointment, they will make every effort to see you.
Good.
And the best way is to call the, I'll put that number in the chat also. If you call the basic line for the Legislative Research Commission, 502-564-8100, just ask for your senator or legislator's assistant, and they will get you to those folks. And those folks too are very friendly and very helpful. Sometimes they do the scheduling, sometimes they're the senator or House member does it, but they'll tell you and help you figure out the best way to connect with them.
Good.
And it's interesting, legislators are really pretty friendly folks. It's amazing to me how many people have never visited their legislator and they'll go sit down and talk to them and they'll say, oh, that wasn't so bad. He's just a regular person. Well, they are just regular people. They just happen to have a little more power than we do. But they generally do want to please, and they are interested in what their constituents think. And they may not agree with you on one issue, and they may agree with you on another. One of our mantras is don't burn bridges, because you never know who you're going to need or want to work with on a particular piece of legislation.
Thank you.
Zitzi, are we?
Yeah. Well,
what do you think?
I think I want to say thank you, Cindy and Becky, for sharing all of this information and all of the work that goes behind tracking how our legislative system is working. So thank you. And thanks to everyone else for being here. The Lexington League will next be getting together to read or to discuss The Color of Law. That will be our next book club on January 31st. And reading is recommended but not required. So you can come for the discussion if you would like. Thanks everyone for being here tonight. We really appreciate you.